Hello, I am Eugenia Sojka, an associate professor at the University of Silesia, the Institute of Literary and Cultural Studies.
My name is Aneta Glowacka. I'm from the same university. I'm assistant professor at the Institute of Cultural Studies.
We have a joint presentation, so here we are. We would like to start with expressing our thanks to the organizers for inviting us to speak at this remarkable cultural event in the digital space, especially at the time when the world says no to so many important initiatives in humanities. We know that it is due to the passion and determination of Floyd Fagel and Alex van der Donkt, Ferrand, and all other people involved in the project, that in spite of the epidemic, they were able to create this online community and inspire many outstanding speakers to get engaged in this initiative. At the time of crisis, we need to get together, and this has been happening. Our sincerest thanks and congratulations to all of you. I will start first with a general introduction to a variety of Indigenous events we have been organizing at the University of Silesia, which eventually led to projects related to Indigenous drama, theatre and performance, and to personal contacts with Floyd Fagel, whose generosity and desire for creating an intercultural dialogue allowed several of our faculty, Sabina Sveta-Sen and Aneta Glowacka, well, who is here, as well as Ivona Wozniak, because I'm going to be theatre director, and Rafa Madea, a PhD student, to get involved in his theatre projects on the reserve. And we have been fortunate to spend time on his territory and learn from him, for which we are extremely grateful. Aneta will follow me with her reflections on the developments in the Upper Silesian theatre today and in the recent decades. A few words about myself. I'm an Upper Silesian and live on the historical territory of Upper Silesia in Poland. I mentioned that I am a professor at the University of Silesia in Katowice, but I also am an adjunct professor at the University of the Fraser Valley in Canada. My interest in Indigenous cultures and literatures started a long time ago when I was working on my PhD in English with a dissertation in Canadian literature at the Memorial University of Newfoundland, focusing then on Canadian language and theory focused writing. But at conferences, I had a chance to learn more about Indigenous topics and meet Indigenous writers and artists. We are talking about the early 1990s. Back to Poland in 1997, I had a chance to teach a variety of Canadian studies courses, and I decided to develop courses in Indigenous literature and culture, as there has always been a lot of interest in the native peoples of Americas in Poland. I was acutely aware and I am acutely aware of the first principle of Indigenous research methodology, which is doing research with Indigenous people rather than on them, and giving the voice to the Indigenous peoples themselves. Although I live and teach in Poland, I do everything in my power, with the help of faculty and graduate students, of course, to organize lectures, workshops, conferences, days of Canadian culture, focusing on Indigenous topics. Many of these events were honored with the presence of Indigenous writers, artists, and academics, actually 26 of them in the 19 years of the existence of the Canadian Studies Centre at the University of Silesia. Just to mention some of the names: Johnson Highway, Monique Mojica, Dawn Martin Hill, Emily Monet, who are also part of this event, Armand Ruffo, Lee Marco, Joanne Episkinu, Michel Laflamme, and Richard Atleo, the hereditary chief of Husa, the author of Tsaog, and Luciano Worldview. We have been, of course, awaiting Floyd Fagel's visit. I'm expatiating on all these details to foreground the importance of these transcultural encounters and dialogues, which had a big decolonizing impact on all of us, and especially on our students who were brought up on American Westerns and had a very reductive view of indigenous cultures, full of stereotypes, even today, perpetuated in various entertainment parks with Indian teepees inhabited by Polish people impersonating Indians. In such an ambience, even mentioning the concept of indigenous drama, theatre, or performance studies in the context of indigenous knowledge used to raise eyebrows, but not anymore. We continue to teach and engage in research projects which have led to such events as the 2017 International Conference on the Indigenous Expressions of Culture in Storytelling, Drama, Theatre and Performance, Traditional and Contemporary Canadian and Polish Upper Silesian perspectives. So stressing here this Upper Silesianness, so it's also interesting in terms of starting a dialogue of the cultures of Indigenous people of Canada and the Polish local, say Indigenous people of this region. This was a joint project of the University of Silesia and the University of Fraser Valley. We had a chance to translate and publish two essays by Floyd. And currently we are finalizing a book on his theatre methodology with a selection of critical essays on his work and a translation of his text to be included in this publication. This is a very important project, as it is for the first time that we are introducing Floyd's pioneering work on the indigenous theatre methodology to Polish readers. The text proposed for the collection place Floyd Favor in the tradition of intercultural and indigenous theatre in Canada and worldwide, and show his importance in the global discourse on indigeneity and interculturality. Both the book and the theatre project itself aim at bringing a new understanding between indigenous and non-indigenous people, as we hope. And we are confident that they will be inspirational to artists who might decide to explore their culturally specific methodologies. We are honored to be involved in the process of bringing Floyd's ideas on theatre to Central Europe. I'd like to add that we also plan an anthology of select indigenous plays from Canada, which we, as in me and Aneta, we will translate into Polish. The joint projects, including the workshops on the reserve with the participation of the Polish group, so to say, indeed have already created a bridge linking the indigenous cultures of Canada and other countries, especially the minority, I would say would use the word indigenous culture of Upper Silesia in Poland. And here I come to the topic I want to reflect upon, the transcultural encounter as having a big impact on my own and my students' self-decolonization and rediscovery or revisioning and reimagining of our Upper Silesian culture, the indigenous culture of Upper Silesia, and specifically about the revisioning of Upper Silesian theatre. The knowledge of indigenous cultures of Upper Silesia has been erased from our consciousness by the communist system and earlier by Christianity itself, which is read today by such scholars as Maria Janjan as the first colonization. At this stage, I'd like to reflect on the process of dreaming up a new alternative Upper Silesian theatre or performance culture, while Aneta will discuss later, as we suggested already, the nature of the contemporary and past Upper Silesian productions in theatre. Years ago, when Richard Atleo asked me a question about the indigenous people of Upper Silesia, I could not answer it, as I never thought about this, the indigeneity of our land, about our ancestors in this way. I said, indigenous people of Upper Silesia. Old stories and folktales were downgraded as pagan and unworthy of attention. Unfortunately, our culture was folklorized and its spirituality erased. This is just a question of terminology, right? We're talking about local people, but we're talking about the indigeneity being close to the land. And so indeed this terminology can be used, although it is disputed by some critics. But we use it with reference to closeness to the land, being local, being indigenous to the area. These are terms that have been discussed by many scholars. I will not go into this at this moment. I think that at this stage I need to say a few words about the historical region of Upper Silesia, as I believe that not many people know where this place is. Even here in Europe, when we say Silesia, Upper Silesia, so probably people wonder, where this particular region is. Well, it is a distinct region of Eastern Central Europe, located today in parts of Poland, Czech Republic, and Germany. So we see already 3 countries, right? And that is, we're talking about the historical geographic region. Due to its geographic location and richness of natural resources, Upper Silesia has always been of interest to the main political powers in Europe. This cultural borderland changed its state allegiance about 10 times. You can imagine 10 times in different countries. Various national narratives were imposed on Upper Silesia throughout history. In the 19th and later 20th century, there were strong Germanization and Polonization policies which discriminated against us when we preferred to be nationally indifferent. We were shamed, humiliated, and generally treated as inferior, just a workforce exploited by those in power or sent as soldiers to fight in the wars of those in power. We are a complex and rich culture. And how many are we? In the 2011 census, the Silesian, or Silesian, I should say, ethnic identity was declared by 809,000 people, close to 1 million, really, out of which 529,000 speak Silesian. These are striking numbers, which, however, did not lead to an official recognition of this distinct group in Poland. We were granted neither the status of an ethnic nor a regional minority group with a regional language, obviously for political reasons. It is important to note that we have our own autonomous history, which differs from Polish history, as the region was separate from Poland for close to 600 years. We have our own language, culture, and literature written in Silesian and translated into Silesian language that has been recently codified. The language is not a dialect of Polish, as the politicians claim. Linguistic experts state otherwise. Silesian is an autonomous Slavic micro-language. It is often stressed that the culturally diversified Silesians, in terms of ethnicity, language, and religion, have a strong affection to the region, and at the same time, tolerance towards other cultures. And paradoxically, what has united Silesia throughout the ages was the acceptance of its diversity, as well as a strong bond with local Silesian indigenous issues. Upper Silesia features then as an open multicultural space where even Silesianness is one of many acceptable identifications. Think of the multiculturality of the place. And all these non-national allegiances and respect for local culture, local indigenous language, diversity, multiculturality, as well as the openness to others, are crucial values that can be regarded as major signifiers of Silesianness. I am particularly attracted, though, to ideas from Zbigniew Kadłubek's study of Silesianness, of I'm quoting here, spiritual otherness of Silesia as a unique spiritual project of this borderland multicultural region in a state of a constant change. There are also important statements in these reflections about the sacredness of this region and sacredness of Silesian language. This acknowledgement of spirituality brings me back to the reflection on the importance of indigeneity touched upon earlier. What we learn from indigenous cultures and methodologies is that we need to fight for the validation of our indigenous Slavic cultures and the knowledge and spirituality inscribed in stories. We also learn that it is time now, high time now, I should say, to re-indigenize the world. So it is also time to re-indigenize Upper Silesia, to validate our indigenous knowledges. We need a vision. I just thought we could dream up a theory of Upper Silesian theatre grounded in pre-Christian perspectives. So it's all about visioning, thinking, imagining. Let us have a new vision of indigenous Upper Silesian dramaturgies. How to achieve the Upper Silesian sovereignty on the stage? Perhaps we could use Floyd Fable's alternative indigenous methodologies as a model for our own local/indigenous expression of culture in theatre. Floyd states, quote, "Our life is based on stories, myths, legends, and supernatural events. You can't express that with naturalism. Therefore, it is logical to develop a theatre system that reflects supernatural realities and to construct performances based on native ways of montage, composition, and structure." Let us explore the Slavic, Upper Silesian ways of montage, composition, and structure. And following Monique Mojica, who states that architecture can be a model for theatrical structure, that the play could be built following the structure of how a TP is raised. Let us explore what would happen if we use the ancient Slavic home structure as a dramaturgical model. Perhaps we could pursue a mound research on the territory of Upper Silesia and translate it into dramaturgical process like Monique Mojica does. Perhaps we could invent something entirely different. What would an inorganic Upper Silesian dramaturgy look like? I don't know if these ideas would work, but I am hungry for the chance to try these things. As Monica Mojica would say, so am I. Now I'd like Aneta to take over and to discuss the various aspects of the theatre in Upper Silesia. Aneta, it's your turn.
It would be a remarkable achievement to invent such dramaturgy specific to our region, but at the moment the theatre in Upper Silesia looks a little bit different. I would like to draw your attention now to the development of Upper Silesian theatre and as an important project in our regional culture. But at first, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this wonderful conference. As I say before, I am a researcher of contemporary theater and assistant professor at the University of Silesia. The primary focus of my research and teaching is the theater of ethnic minorities. I have researched the representation of Silesian culture in the contemporary Polish theater, and I have written a number of articles on this topic. In 2014, I co-organized at the University of Silesia an international conference entitled Theater of Local Histories in Central Europe. It was dedicated to the problem of national and ethnic minorities in Central Europe. In addition to the articles devoted to the issue of the Silesian minority, I also wrote about the Jewish minority in Poland. I wrote an article about Jewish community in pre-war Białystok. It's a city in northern Poland, and an attempt to recover this story by the theater. Recently, however, my scientific interests have been directed towards the theater and drama of the indigenous people of Canada, and as Eugenia said, we cooperate together. Last summer and in 2018, summer in 2018, I was invited by Floyd Pavel to participate in the theater workshop on the Poundmaker Reserve, where I had a chance to study the principles of Floyd Indigenous theater, and I'm grateful for that experience. Last summer, I also had opportunity to come to Canada as part of the Canadian Studies postdoctoral fellowship, which was for me a great chance to meet a number of renowned scholars dealing with topics of special interest to me, like Kahente Hormiller and Ursula Neybrook-Denzer. And it was a wonderful meetings for me. I could also meet artists and animators of Indigenous culture and meet cultural leaders of Indigenous people like Kelly Daniels, Lana Reilbert, Lux Benson. It was a crucial academic experience for me, and I'm happy for that. And I wish to use this knowledge in the future, not only to popularize Canadian culture in Poland, but also to add my voice to the development of the cross-culture research in Poland. Now, I would like to say something about Silesian tradition in amateur and professional theater. How does it look like? Research on Silesian culture has been conducted for many years in Poland. Mainly, it was ethnographic and historical research. Relatively recently, the indigenous Silesian culture has been considered as equal to the Polish culture. Regional education in school appeared about 15 years ago. Classes in Silesian culture at the University of Silesia has been conducted for 5 years. Initially, it was only postgraduate studies. Silesian studies as an academic course are still not very popular. However, knowledge about the region is also introduced in classes conducted in other fields such as cultural studies. During my presentation, I would like to say a few words about the presence of Silesian culture and tradition in theater, which has been an area of my research interest for several years. The amateur theater in Upper Silesia has a rich tradition. It is enough to say that it was already at the end of the 19th century that various societies were in operation in this area, which under the supervision of local teachers prepared amateur performances interspersed with local indigenous songs. Their activity was not only a form of protest against the escalating Bismarck's policy of Kulturkampf, but above all a way of animating cultural life, the Silesian culture and the Christian religion. And what should be added, the desire to incorporate Polish patterns and the Polish language into the local element was of import here. The language which was considered, not without historical reason, closer to the Silesian people. Silesia, especially Upper Silesia, had extremely intricate history which was constantly revised and subject to in-depth interpretation. Upper Silesia, as Eugenia said, located east of the Odra River, divided by Silesian Piast, continued to change hands from the Czech Habsburgs to the Prussian Hohenzollerns. Therefore, it was not until the 40s of the 19th century that we could talk about raising awareness of the Silesians in the sense of a feeling of community with the rest of the Polish nation. The Polishness of the inhabitants of this land, especially the peasants, because the majority of nobility submitted themselves to Germanization, was evidenced by the language described as Ruten Wasserpolnisch, which could be fixed only thanks to the church and religious practices. In the end of 19th century and beginning of 20th century, the only form of Polish theater was amateur theater, involving in those years with incredible force were determined by historical reasons. Some of the researchers quite rightly regard the activities of such theatre as one of the more attractive and relatively non-invasive forms of the so-called internal colonization. Although Upper Silesia was never a strictly colonial territory, its geographical location and unstable nationality, changing many times over the centuries, made it a cultural and political borderland. As a result, the Silesians often identified themselves as a cultural minority against a given dominant foreign culture, such as German, Prussian, and even Polish. In Silesia region, during that time, there were a few local playwrights who at the same time were social activists. They create a repertoire for the amateur stages. These dramas were preparing the ground for a deeper reflection of local viewers upon their own history and their place in the newest history, shaped thought in the context of Silesian relationship with Poland. In the 1930, the number of amateur groups ranged, it was about 800 groups in this area. Many of them operated in few Silesian cities among people largely employed in the mining and metallurgical industries. Their relationship with the Polish culture and theatre was not as strong as with their own native folk culture. And there were few types of amateur theatre, but I think the most interesting is that one that didn't imitate professional drama theatre, but performed its native creative potential, its traditions, customs, and values. As Jędrzej Cieżniak, one of the most important amateur theatre animators in this area, said, artistic work among the rural community should only rely on creating conditions for such groups where or any dormant human talent or abilities could be liberated to speak, to manifest themselves, but preferably on their own, without bending these talents one way or another to fit any templates which kill creative freedom. After the Second World War, the movement of amateur theatre in Upper Silesia was gradually marginalized for political reasons. The authorities' defiance of the self-generated and spontaneous nature of artistic activities made many amateur theatres unable to fully realize the cultural needs of their own environment. Amateur stages were also encumbered with an obligation to participate actively in the village action, which required them to organize propaganda performances on their traveling shows, which aim at raising awareness of achievements of the socialist system in peasants. The folk, working class, plebeian and ritual theatres lost momentum and interest of the wider public. Today, many theatres try to display primarily the Silesian dialect in their artistic activity, that is, its melody, syntax, and accent. Actors use it both with great ease and with reverence. They are in their language, and this language, that is the Silesian dialect in its many local variants, is not only the basic way of communicating with people like them, but it is their natural word. It is owning to this language they present their mental image of the world and its perceptions. This ability and simultaneously a skill make actors in the depositors of the Silesian identity. It is the identity which, according to Michał Smolosz, a Silesian important publicist, over centuries has been subjected to a number of deformations, has been absorbing the traits of the neighboring dominant cultures such as Prussian, German, or Polish. Also, it should be stated that the repertoire theatre in Upper Silesia fairly late took an interest in history and indigenous culture of the region as the material to be performed on stage, because it was only in the last 12 years. Moreover, the first spectacle about cultural distinctiveness of the region on the professional stage had its premiere not in a public theater, but in Chorus Theater, a private theater in Katowice, the capital of the region. The directors of number of public theaters long defended themselves against Silesian issues, giving a lack of attractive dramas for the theater as a reason. They didn't notice that authors in Upper Silesia, who knowing the region's character, its history and culture, could prepare a text for a professional theater, and recognized non-Silesian playwrights neither understood the region's specifics and its complicated past, nor spoke its dialect, whose presence on the stage would be a relevant form of expression of the indigenous culture. The decision to give up plays on Silesian themes, though nobody admitted it openly, was also influenced by the perception of the Silesian culture as folk culture, and thus lacking in artistic aspirations. The first theater to introduce a reflection on the region's cultural distinctiveness onto professional stage was, as I said, that Chorus. It was in 204, and Robert Talarczyk and Mirosław Neinert, two directors, staged the drama Holonek. The play was based on the book written by Horst Eckert, a German author, but he wrote this book in Silesian language. This story describes the fortunes of a traditional Silesian family depicted against the background of historical transformations, which encompassed the interwar period, the time of the war's turmoil, and the period immediately after the Second World War. The spectacle has enjoyed enormous popularity in Silesia, and it was staged in many cities in Upper Silesia and also in Poland. Even it was recorded as and shown on Polish television. Since this spectacle was created, a number of performances with references the history and cultural identity of inhabitants of the region have been staged in theaters of Silesia. One of them was Polterabend, and this drama was presented in Teatr Śląski Theater, who is a public theater. It was first time when Silesian themes, when Silesian story was shown in the public theater. And the title of the spectacle was related to a Silesian custom of breaking glass and porcelain on the day before the wedding ceremony in front of the Bridges family house. The author's attention was focused primarily on presenting a complicated story of a Silesian family against the background of the difficult 20th century history of the region. The Silesian strategy of adapting to the changing political reality was also quite strongly exposed there. The similar to Polterabend were discussed in another spectacles performed on stage of Śląski Theater, who since 2013, when the Silesian Robert Talarczyk became director of the theater, regularly prepares performances that deal with Silesian themes. Theatrical activities undertaken by amateur group and professional teams differ in terms of aesthetic and the level of performance, but they all serve one purpose. The identity project created in them help a potential viewer to perform Silesianness on their own, in accordance with the times and their life experience. And although it refers to folk-like thinking, the Silesian culture is not identical with the indigenous culture of the region. Certain elements of the indigenous culture preserved in the tradition of the oldest generation are disappeared from everyday life. Today, many people can access them primarily in the theater, where they can most strongly experience a connections with their cultural past and their ancestral tradition. Thank you so much for your attention and listening this presentation.
So, as you have seen, we have presented, well, two aspects of the theatre of the region of Upper Silesia. This what indeed has been happening, and this what we hope to happen as well in the future, and the developments, as we presume might occur, will be the results of the intercultural or transcultural, I should say, encounters that have already begun some time ago. So we could see, this the importance of such initiatives, and as we've said before, we are hoping that what has already been started in terms of the relationship will continue, and on our side, on our part, we are doing everything that we can to present the indigenous cultures of Canada in Poland. I guess at this stage we would like to thank again the organizers for inviting us, for letting us to present our ideas, and once again we appreciate all the help we have been receiving and all the ideas we have been taught, and especially about the importance of indigeneity, and the whole aspect of re-indigenization is something that has become of great interest to us. Yes, we think of re-indigenizing the world as an important concept. Think of all the important aspect of indigeneity as crucial for saving the world. Thank you very much. Again, Aneta would like to add something as well.
Yes, thank you for listening our presentation, and we invite you to discuss with us on this subject, is about identity and cross-cultural studies, and
that's the hope for future, right? Especially we might be organizing another event, a conference or workshop. So we hope that the dialogue will continue, and it will. That's our hope and vision. Thank you very much.
thank you so much.
Okay, bye bye.